Welcome to this video on the syllabus editor. I'm going to sign in with someone who has teacher permissions, and we'll walk through how the syllabus editor works. I'm going to start with a brand new course just so we can get an idea what a clean syllabus looks like. Okay, so I'm going to click on the editor, and it's going to allow me to choose the editor I want. So I'm going to go to my new course, and let's focus a little bit about how the syllabus editor is laid out. So first off, you can see across the top that we have syllabus, projects, weights, activity list, calendar, and grouping. And so we'll go through these one at a time and explain how they work. You also have a few additional menus up at the top. Some of these are repetitive, but the settings one is the most important one. So let's just look into the settings first. You'll notice that in the new design, we don't have any panels going down the right hand side as we used to. They're now all going across the top. So first off, courses. You can set your title, terms, beginning and end date. This is where you would turn on student tasks if you wanted to. You can also see these other options down in here. Subscriber search index. These things were available to you previously, but just in a different location. If you're going to use variables in the course, certainly that's your option. If you're going to continuous instead of ranged courses, you can set that up there. You'll want to be able to identify your thumbnail and what your course color is. Clearly, you can just simply choose a file. And you can also choose a color. You may also want to provide some landing information. You can also have gradebook detail. So whether you're doing points, percentages, letter grades, rubrics in there, you can see your grading scales. You can add new grading scales if you want to. You can do letter grades. You can do 1 to 100. You can do 1 to 4. You can do below basic, proficient, and advanced if you want to. You can set up all of those. You also can set up your categories if you have them, grading periods if you use them. There's some optional information in here that you can look at and review, as well as enrollment completion. Most of the time that's just going to be set to manual. If you're doing any kind of formative assessment, this is where you would set them up. The number of questions that you need to have presented and the number correct. Any badges that you're going to award upon completion of the course you would assign here as well. So that's kind of how we have the things set up there. If you're doing multi-outcome scoring, then you'll have the ability to edit those outcomes in here. I only have one set up on my domain right now, but you could have the deeper thinking, the Hewlett Foundation deeper thinking. You could also have the 4 C's. You could make up your own if you want to, but this allows you to turn on the multi-outcome scoring so that any one activity could have multiple buckets in order to grade. So pretty handy when you're doing project-based learning and other areas where you're trying to grade against presentation, knowledge, working with your team, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And again, all of that is up here in the settings tab. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the new layout. You've got these little chevrons up here that allow you to open and close the environment to maximize your screen space. It's broken up into 3 areas. The first area on the left is where you'll deal with your objectives and badges. The middle is where you will sequence your instruction, your playlist, your scaffolding. On the right hand side is where you will see the properties for any one item, as well as the resources connected to this particular course. So let's go through and set up a few. First off, if I want to go ahead and add some outcomes, I can simply click on that. We're going to add some math to this science course so that we have a combination of both. We'll grab those and we'll bring them in and we'll go ahead and save. So you can see that I've got them. If I want to add some more, I can certainly add them one at a time if I want to, or I can go back and grab some additional ones from in here. So easy enough to go in and add and work with them. If you want to delete them, you just simply click on it, hit the delete button. It's no longer in the course. If you wanted to change the text of that, you can go into edit and make it simpler to use. So some good things you can do there. Now let's look a bit at what's happened. So you can see here we've got some outcomes, and you can see inside those outcomes we're now tracking non-gradable and gradable activities. And so this is very helpful as I'm starting to build out the course, because if I've got an outcome that I'm trying to instruct on and I have no gradable activities, how do I gather evidence? And vice versa, if I've got some gradable activities but I don't have any scaffolding, well then where's the instruction? And so as you move through a course, you should see these both move off the 0 mark in order to make sure that it's equally balanced. Now, as far as badges are concerned, there are some default badges. They're available for you to use. They're set up in the domain again. You can also add your own badges to the course. So if you have a badge that you want to have available inside your course, you can go ahead and set up the name, images, descriptions. Whenever you see a little blue circle like this, you'll be seeing more of these. They'll give you some help with a learn more that goes to the support page. And just click it to remove it again. So your ability to create additional badges is just a click away. Okay, let's talk a little bit about working with the manifest itself and how we sequence information. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add, and you'll see this is the way that we've now organized the options for things that can be added to the course. So certainly you can still add folders, and you can organize all your information via folders if you like. A folder simply creates an item, so we'll call this Unit 1, and I could have some additional landing page. So we have the landing page. There's also additional data, so if you wanted to change the thumbnail away from this folder icon to an icon of your choice, you can choose it and apply it here. There's also metadata. You're going to see metadata popping up all over the place, so we might as well describe it now. Metadata is important in describing projects and describing folders, and you can control it so that it's available for the teacher as far as their understanding of maybe the big picture, vocabulary, things of that nature, but you can also make it so that it shows up for the student, and then they see the data as well. So let's talk about how this is set up. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. If I come back up to the settings, actually I need to do this in the admin app. So I'm going to come over to the admin. This is set up per domain. So if I come into the settings, under courses, you'll see here's the detail that I just saw over on the data tab. And so based upon how this is set up, you need to give it a unique name, but then if I edit this, you'll see that it has the name, it has the title, which would be shown, and then you can determine what type of value you want that item to be. Most of the time it's going to be a rich text box if you're describing something. Not sure what levels do. I'll have to get back to you on that. But the item type, is this available for everything or just for an activity or folder? And so then down here on the bottom, is it visible to students? If you check that, then they'll be able to see that detail. You can also set this per group if you want to. So it's very important that if you want to use the metadata as a way to explain to students what this particular module is about, unit is about, project is about, then you're going to want to make sure that they're displayed or the student display is set. So in this case, the problem is set, driving question is set, vocabulary is not set, essential question is set, and project at a glance I believe is also set. So I'll go through and fill out a few, the vocabulary being the one exception that's not set, so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so if I double click on Unit 1 again, I can come back over the data. We'll pick up where we were. So I have a description, and I'm just going to fill out each one of these really quickly so you can see what they look like on the student screen. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so let's add something inside Unit 1. Now you'll see that when we click on this, I can still add to my course, or now I can add to my unit. I just choose whichever one I want to do. I'm going to put some rich text in here so that I have an item to display. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at it. So if I come out here, I've got my course, I've got my welcome. As I come into Unit 1, okay, so you can see this is the landing page detail. And then you can see we've got the description, the project, the essential questions. We've got everything else on the right-hand side. And this would just echo down what was in the table of contents. So if you're going full screen, you have the ability to still work with your detail. Obviously, when you go there, you're going to have your course detail. So some good information that happens on this. Okay, so we've back over here. There's some additional things that we can do. Okay, let's add a few more things. So we've talked about a folder. Let's go to the digital library. And let's just say I'm going to look for some science items. And you can see that I've got a bunch of them. I'm just going to go ahead and select a few of these. And we'll just grab some of those and then go ahead and put them in. You can see that they'll drop into the course nicely, and we're kind of off and running. So the digital library, fairly easy to do. These items over here are really quick adds. So what you have the ability to do is give it a title and then paste the code, attach, reach. They're very fast. They're meant to be just a couple of lines and in you go. You'll remember that this one was also a quick add, but if I double click on it, it does give me the rest of the panels in order to update that. So putting them in using this quick add works well, but if you need to come back in and drive a little deeper, certainly you can. The rest of these items over on the right hand side you can add. These are familiar in behavior to the ones you were previously used to. With some minor modifications, we're not going to go through them all, but certainly let's go through one or two of them. We'll look at an assessment first. So we'll just say, hey, here's my quiz, and this is my instructions for the quiz. And then you can have attachments. A couple of new things that the team has put in there. You can now turn on editors, or excuse me, you can now turn on calculators. You can also add additional reading material necessary for any one question, so you're not having to have the student scroll up and scroll down in order to read. You can actually just put the reading context there and then pop it open in its own window, so that's really nice to have. We've redone the questions, so if I had lots of questions and I wanted to add them once, I could add them here and in they go. Or if I just wanted to start new, I could link out and find pre-existing question banks and pull things in from there if I wanted to, or simply click new question. We've changed this around a bit so you still see the questions that we support and how they work, but at the same point now I can also do a lot of the bolding, underlining, easy formatting without necessarily going in and out of the editor. So is the weather nice in New Hampshire? And we hit enter and the answer is yes. We hit enter, the answer is no. And so we still select the right answer, and there's different things over here. I can do feedback on choice. I can lock it if I want to in its position. I can delete it if I want to. Certainly I have, again, more feedback that I can provide here if I wanted to do that. So the editor's cleaned up some if I wanted to do things a lot easier to do it this way. And so it's just nice. They've done a good job. If I have another question, I simply click new question. Again, I have additional stuff that I can do. Let's do a multi-answer this time. What are elements of the periodic table? And we'll say gold, we'll say copper, and iron, and watermelon. Okay, and we'll also delete this last one, and then we'll just say, well, these are, so we'll check those. Now, something else that we've done a little bit differently that we're pretty excited about is that I can flip between the text mode and the visual mode. So if I wanted to change something in here, and let's say I didn't want watermelon anymore, I could put this just melon in general. And then when I flip back over to the visual tab, it will have updated it. And so instead of going to the advanced editor and not being able to come back, we now have the benefit of bouncing in between both, which is great. You have a number of properties on the right hand side, passages, outcomes you're aligning against, points, the calculator again, variables, the companion reading material. You again have the ability to change the thumbnail for this quiz. So instead of the question mark, you can put your own. Again, metadata that you have available to you certainly is there. Any outcomes you're aligning it to, the gradebook detail, how you're going to score it, where it sits in the table of contents, whether it's visible, whether it's restricted, all those things that we've done in the past are still all there. How are they marked as complete? The assessment settings are the things that were on the right-hand panel previously. The number of attempts, how much time, question, can I print, randomization, feedback. If we go a little further down, allowing prints, pulling from a question bank, minimum attempts, all of that detail is there. You now have exam templates that you can put into the system. I'd highly recommend looking at those. They make for a great experience for the user. Combining content and a template into a really good way for delivering and evaluating learning. So all of that is there. Then of course you have the history, how many times this has been edited. This is the first one in, so there's not a lot of history there. So anyway, good stuff happening in here. All of the additional editors will follow this same pattern across the top. So let's go look at a few, and then also, like for instance, an assignment. You're going to see the activity, the data, the objectives, gradebook. If I looked at the gradebook, how am I setting it up? New to the mix in gradebook are rubrics, so you're going to want to take a look at rubrics. Rubrics are set up at the domain level now, considerably easier to work with rubrics than in the past. And so I can go ahead and grab a rubric, and based upon that rubric, I then can modify it. So maybe I don't want a merging on this, so I'll delete it. I can come down further. Maybe I don't want this column, so I can delete it. Maybe I want to change the wording in here. I could do that as well. And then I'm just going to set the title. So anyway, I can change the scores. You can change anything in here, and then I can go ahead and save it. So very efficient way of managing rubrics now that we didn't have before. So something to keep an eye on. And then again, the tabs across the top. So it works out pretty well, and I think that you'll like the way that it's set up. So blogs, wikis, discussions, journals, homeworks, all that stuff is there. If you've created any collections of learning activities brought together into a single clickable event, then they would show up down here on the bottom. So for instance, learn, practice, apply, and assess. Great model. So if I click on that, it's going to say, okay, where do I want it? Or what am I going to call it? So we'll call this Unit 1 again, Unit 1, and we'll say okay. And you'll see that it pops into a folder, and it just creates that hierarchy. And then you can see that I can add things to each one of these modules as I need to. Certainly drag and drop is all the rage, so we're very good at doing this part of the puzzle. I can move things around, put them wherever I need to put them. So all that works out really well. Let's talk a little bit about our outcomes again, right? So another very good thing here is now I can start dragging and dropping my outcomes. And so as I see activities that I know are going to be used, I can just simply drag those onto the item I want, and I'm off and running. And so as we continue to go down here, you can see how the counts are starting to come up. I've got one quiz down here, and I'm going to quiz against that one. So you can see that as we move through here, I'm going to see the gradable, non-gradable move around. So pretty straightforward way of aligning the outcomes. If you switch to badging, the badging occurs the same way. So I can say, here's a target badge that I'm going to deliver when all the items in that folder are successful. I could also come up and give it a unit badge as well. So if I came up here and said, hey, I want a unit badge, they're going to get the unit badge when everything in Unit 1 is done. And so your ability to manage badges, work with badges, create your own badges, it works really well because I simply bounce between these. So it's all drag and drop enabled, super easy. When I minimize this, they move out of the way, and I can now focus back on creating additional stuff. So let's talk about the resource panel for a minute. So we've updated how this works. You can create new folders, you can upload resources if you want to, but better than that is simply dragging and dropping those items on here. So for instance, if I knew that I had some PDFs or information I wanted, I could just grab that and drag it over, and you can see that it pops right up, and I let go. I've now got an item. I can turn around, take that item, and drag it on to my manifest. So super easy to do that. If I had a folder of items I needed to take, I could grab the folder and simply bring it over and let go, and it will go ahead and build the folder. You can now see that it says resources background, and the images are there. And again, same kind of concept. I can simply grab it and bring it over and drop it on. can see I've got it twice there, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So pretty straightforward on how to set those items up. So a couple of other things we did here on the inside, on the manifest itself, we brought the most likely items that you would use out to the edge. So if I was working on this one, not quite ready to give it to the students, I can just simply click it. Or this project down here, I can click it and just simply, it's now hidden from students. Very straightforward. If I wanted to edit that, I just simply hit the pencil and I'm off and running again. So we brought up visibility and editing to the main page. If you want to move things up or down and you're doing it by the mouse, then great. You can obviously click and drag those items as well and delete them and preview. Duplicate is the same thing as we had of copy and paste. So if I wanted to duplicate this, it's going to say, okay, where do you want this to show up somewhere? And then you can just duplicate it. So if you have a series of templates that you're using to build your courses out with, you could have those up in a teacher resource only environment that was hidden from students, and then simply copy and or duplicate them down into the course as you needed to use the templates. So that works out pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to flip over and show you a little bit more built out course you can kind of see. And in this case, if I come over to outcomes, you can see how the outcomes are set up. Gradable, non-gradable, everything's filled out. Badging, how the badging is set up. Again, pretty straightforward there. If I pull on my resources, you can see my resources and when they were brought on. So all of this, once you start filling it out, becomes really ready to go. It works out really well. So there's a completed course. Okay, let's take a look at projects. In this case, I've got one project that is past. It's out of my date window. I've got another project that is in the middle of being worked on, so it's current. I can list these and you know, obviously as lists or blocks. If I'm going to turn on and if I'm going to create a new one, I can click on the add. I can also go to the library and discover one, or I can convert a folder from a prior course into a project. So let's just create a new one so you can kind of see what's going on. We're going to call this working with hydrogen. And it's kind of a start date and an end date, and we'll just let those go as good. Now the good thing about start and end dates is that they are independent of the start and end date of the course, independent of the start and end date of the enrollment. They really are mini projects inside the course, so the students know when they need to get them done. They have their own progress bar, they have their own score, so it works out really well. The building out of a project is very similar to building anything else in the course. You simply add things to that project. So if I came in here and I wanted to go ahead and add a project, and I say, yep, reviewing hydrogen, and then my project description, and if I'm doing group submissions, that would go there. I would include, and again, these are just a template, so they can be modified later on. I can add a group if I want to, so I could set up the groups that would produce a group assessment for me, and then I'll go ahead and add. And so now you can see this populates out. If I knew that I was going to do a couple of other ones, I could simply come up here and I could say duplicate this again, and I want it in working with hydrogen, and now I've got another one. I'm going to double click on this, and we're going to say this one is called hydrogen and oxygen. And again, I could fill out the landing page, but lots of ways I can start filling out and completing what this is going to look like. So then when I come back, if I wanted to go back to the projects page, I now have two projects. Again, if I wanted to customize this further, I could simply double click on this, and on the data tab I could choose my own thumbnail if I wanted to. I can turn on the projects and questions. So this is where really the project at a glance comes in pretty handy. And off I go. So you can see how this is set up. I could choose to split this between groups if I wanted to, and I can go ahead and save this. So now when I come back to the page, I'm good to go. I've got my project. I can now just assign it to groups or teams, and I'm off and running again. So projects are going to be fun to have. When you play the course, you'll actually see that we've brought the projects up to the front. So these are active projects. I then have my agenda, and I complete it with my landing page. So if you start using projects, you're going to see them front and center at the very top of the home page. And then they'll be available down in here if you want them from the table of contents, or you obviously can just click into them from here. And then I can expose out what they look like and what they're doing, and so it actually works out fairly well. So that's kind of how projects work. I'm going to come back over to the editor again. So we have projects covered. Weighting, again, pretty straightforward. You can define weights by points or percentages, and you can set up either if you have any categories that are empty, well then that's probably going to be a problem. Up in settings again is how you set up those categories. They're under the grading, so you'd have your grading categories here, so that's how that gets set up, and then they're displayed here. So you go into settings, set your categories, and then you can use your categories. The activity list is a way for us to be able to look at the activities that currently are in the course, and then you can filter those activities by the type, so you can see if your course is well balanced. You can also filter it by the title, so you can come in and you can say, do I have any quizzes in here, and it would simply go through. And then from here you can select them, and we're going to have a batch update process that will allow you to edit a bunch of these at the same time, so your working with activities will be greatly enhanced. We also have the calendar. The calendar is running along fantastically. You can simply drag and drop an item onto a due date and you're good to go. If you needed to move that, you can click on the date and simply drag it onto a different date, and then you're good there. So the ability to look in a list view or the syllabus view allows you to then organize by due date, by visibility, and grade release date. So a lot of good things happening there. And then finally, the group settings. Group settings have always been a little bit tricky to know what we've done, and so now you can choose a group and you can look at the details on who can see what. The visibility in here is shut off for certain ones. You can see that. If you were to flip to due date, you'd have due dates on these, and you could see, you could actually double click these and change the due date for the group directly from here as well. This makes it pretty handy to be able to move things around, so you can edit from in here. You also have activities, and you can see the visibility on the activities for those groups and just bounce through the activities. So I can say, well, which group has it? I don't want them to see it, right? So you can just take that visibility and change it, or the due date if I want to double click on the due date. So we've tried to make things that were buried, bring them right up to the surface. So I think you'll like this part of the group settings as well. So anyway, I think we've done some really good work here. Very excited for you all to start using it. Remember, go through the settings tab, syllabus, projects, weights, activity calendar, group settings. It should really make for better authoring and better manipulation of content that's licensed or through the OER, and making it more personalized for the students you're working with. Certainly, I would suggest looking at the support.agilix.com site for additional information. And as always, you can certainly reach back out and ask me directly. Thanks.